New York, UN headquarters, 10:37 a.m. The General Assembly Hall was full, every delegate waiting for the next speaker. The topic: the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Israel's representative had just finished a fiery speech, accusing Pakistan of meddling and funding extremist narratives. The Pakistani delegation sat stone-faced, their leader, Ambassador Nadia Rahman, flipping through a leather-bound folder. Inside, it was not just her speech, but evidence. When she walked to the podium, the cameras zoomed in. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of a storm. Pakistan comes not to trade accusations, but to present facts. She held up a flash drive. The UN technicians loaded the contents onto the giant screen. Suddenly, leaked documents appeared, internal memos, procurement orders, and satellite images, showing Israeli contractors allegedly involved in illegal settlement expansions and the destruction of civilian infrastructure. Gasps filled the room. A few delegates whispered. The Israeli representative rose in protest, but the chair silenced him. Ambassador Rahman's tone never wavered. "These are not my words. These are your documents." The shockwave was immediate. Several nations called for an emergency vote on sanctions. Even U.S. delegates looked uncomfortable. By the time Rahman returned to her seat, Pakistan's flag was trending on social media worldwide, and journalists were running out of the press gallery like ants from a kicked nest. In the corridors outside, a reporter cornered her. "Ambassador Rahman, are you not worried about retaliation?" She smiled faintly. Truth fears nothing. But deep inside Pakistan's mission office, she knew this was just the first round. She had more evidence. Much more. And Israel knew it. While the fictional account is cinematic, a real-life version would be less dramatic but still impactful. Pakistan has no formal diplomatic relations with Israel and has long been a strong advocate for Palestinian rights in international forums. In reality, such embarrassment at the UN could happen if 1. Pakistan led a resolution condemning Israeli actions in Gaza or the West Bank, backed by a strong majority from the Global South and Muslim-majority nations. 2. Revealed credible evidence from independent sources, possibly through investigative reports, that highlighted violations of international law by Israel. 3. Used historical moral standing. Pakistan has chaired the UN Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People to challenge Israel directly on live broadcast. 4. Forged unexpected alliances, convincing non-Muslim nations like South Africa, Brazil, and Ireland to co-sponsor the resolution, which would give it more weight internationally. Such a move wouldn't defeat Israel outright, but it could result in a landslide symbolic vote against Israel's policies, a shift in public opinion and media coverage globally, a greater diplomatic isolation for Israel on certain UN issues. The reality is that Pakistan's strongest weapon at the UN is not military might but moral leverage and strategic coalition building. 2 hours later, UN Security Council lounge. The air reeked of espresso and political tension. Small clusters of diplomats huddled together, whispering. Ambassador Nadia Rahman sat alone, scrolling through her phone as messages poured in from Islamabad. Across the room, Israel's ambassador paced furiously, speaking on a secure line. "We cannot let this narrative stick. Get Washington on board. Now." The U.S. delegation, caught off guard by Pakistan's move, found itself in a delicate position, defending Israel without appearing to endorse the exposed evidence. Meanwhile, South Africa and Turkey requested a closed-door meeting to propose an unprecedented step: a UN investigative panel into Israeli settlement activities. That night, a breaking news alert flashed worldwide. UN votes 141-9 in favor of independent investigation into Israeli actions. Pakistan-backed resolution passes overwhelmingly. The shock was global. Israel's allies scrambled to do damage control. But in Islamabad, fireworks lit the night sky. Social media erupted with hashtags like #Pakistan and #TruthPrevails. However, Nadia knew the storm had just begun. Intelligence sources warned her that several governments were quietly working to discredit her, even digging into her personal history. And somewhere in Tel Aviv, a classified file marked Operation Counterstrike was being opened. In a real-world UN setting, such an event wouldn't move at Hollywood speed, but the impact could still be seismic. Immediate diplomatic ripples. After Pakistan's speech, countries like Turkey, Malaysia, and Indonesia could rally behind the resolution, while non-Muslim states with strong human rights records, such as Ireland, Norway, and South Africa, might also co-sponsor. A media frenzy. International outlets could highlight Pakistan's boldness, shifting the narrative from Israel's accusations to the content of the evidence. Resolution outcome. A General Assembly resolution might pass overwhelmingly, though in the Security Council, the US could veto any binding action. To behind-the-scenes pressure, Pakistan's diplomats could face increased scrutiny, while Israel's lobbying network would work overtime to influence neutral states and undermine the credibility of the claims. In reality, the embarrassment wouldn't come from a single moment, but from Pakistan successfully shifting the global conversation and forcing uncomfortable debates in diplomatic corridors where Israel normally enjoys more support. If you want, the next part could explore, in the fictional arc, how Pakistan survives the covert retaliation campaign. In the real arc, how sustained diplomacy could turn this into a long-term geopolitical win for Pakistan. Islamabad Prime Minister's Office, 1:12 a.m. The Prime Minister leaned over the polished desk, the glow of a secure laptop illuminating his face. "Nadia, I just got word from our intelligence bureau. You're a target now." Ambassador Nadia Rahman's stomach tightened. The file marked eyes only contained satellite images of a man trailing her in New York, a former private contractor linked to an Israeli security firm. Meanwhile, at UN headquarters, an emergency late-night session was called. Israel's ambassador presented a thick dossier alleging Pakistan was funding militant networks. But when the floor opened for responses, South Africa's delegate stunned everyone by playing an audio leak, a recording of Israeli officials discussing strategies to pressure smaller nations into voting no on the investigation. The audio had been anonymously sent from an encrypted account traced back to Geneva. The world's media ran wild. News tickers screamed, "UN in turmoil. Espionage allegations shake diplomatic core." In the shadows, Nadia received a text from an unknown number. "You exposed us. Now we expose you. TikTok." She didn't know it yet, but the next blow would come not from a speech, but from a cyber attack that could cripple Pakistan's diplomatic communications. In the real world, the retaliation wouldn't look like movie espionage, but rather a covert discrediting. Pro-Israel lobbying groups might quietly fund think tanks or media outlets to publish reports painting Pakistan as unreliable or biased, aiming to erode the credibility of its UN delegation. The back-channel pressure. Countries with strong ties to Israel, particularly in Europe, could apply economic or diplomatic pressure on Pakistan's allies to withdraw support from the investigation. A media counter-narrative. Stories focusing on Pakistan's internal political instability or human rights issues could dominate headlines to shift attention away from the UN embarrassment. A gradual diplomatic pushback. Over the following months, Israeli diplomats would work to rebuild lost ground, offering trade or security incentives to swing nations back to their side in future UN votes. If Pakistan wanted to turn this into a lasting win, it would need to maintain consistent coalition building with both Muslim majority and human rights-focused non-Muslim nations. Release independent, verifiable evidence through respected neutral bodies. Avoid being baited into aggressive rhetoric that could be spun as extremist or anti-Semitic.